Welcome to Hire Without the Guesswork, hire the right people faster with AI. And we are here to really, hopefully, provide some exciting insights, but also maybe potentially debunk some myths and answer some questions that you have. So we will be spending about 45 minutes together. I think the content will run 30 to 35 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. You'll notice at the bottom there's a Q&A with the question. That's where you can drop your questions. We will endeavor to answer as many as possible. I have some of my team on the call here who might answer them in written form. And then depending on the question, we'll have an amazing array of folks on our panel who can also answer those questions. My name is Carmen Bryan. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Wizehire. I actually celebrated my 3-year anniversary on Friday. It snuck up on me. And it's been amazing. We've learned so much. And I think for all of us now in this sort of era of AI, it continues to be a knowledge journey for sure. Before I was here, I worked at Indeed for about 6 years, leading US marketing there. So very close sort of work in the HR tech space for the past 10 years, always with the focus on thinking about how to help employers find the right people faster, more effectively, more efficiently. And so I'm always excited when we do webinars and we get to have conversations because it's just a really, it's like a good moment and it's a good time for us to reflect on all of the things and all the reasons why we're here today. Um, so before we sort of bring up our panelists or start to bring up our panelists, I thought it'd be great for us to start with a quick poll and just hear from folks what your top hiring challenge is. There you go. So what are your top hiring challenges? Feel free to select multiple options. It's always kind of a good opportunity for us to just level set and see where folks' head is at. I always have my guess about, which one is going to rise to the top. But I'm always curious to see with each sort of cohort if that remains the same. We'll give folks a couple more minutes, not minutes, couple more seconds. Let's see what you all say. See, so the top hiring challenge by and large is finding enough qualified candidates. And not surprised by that. That's typically the one that we see the most. And I think it's a really interesting one because, yes, it is a very big problem and a very big challenge for a lot of folks. But I think there's also a lot of other things that kind of roll into that. Like not finding enough candidates can be about visibility, it can be about your process, it can be about whether or not your hiring managers internally are working in a cohesive way. It can be about where you're sourcing talent from. It can be about a variety of different things. So it's never really a big surprise for me when this one rises to the top. And I think our conversation today is really going to help us think about this, and especially in terms of when we think about the role that AI can play in this. And also when we think a little bit more also about where we are finding people and how we're sourcing talent as well. So why don't we start to jump in a bit? I'm going to be your moderator, but I'm going to be joined by two amazing panelists and then a special guest a little later on. But first, I wanted to bring up our first panelist who I'm going to be chatting with, who is Grace Savides. Hopefully I said that correctly, who's a senior market research analyst from G2. Grace, do you want to just tell everybody a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Grace Savides. You did say that right, Carmen. I'm
Thank
a
you.
senior market research analyst at G2, which is a review marketplace. I have worked in HR software for about coming up on like 6 years now. And during that time, I've been a thought leader. I've been a a researcher, just really honing in on specifically recruiting, employee engagement, that side of HR. That's kind of really where I am happiest and love to be. So I'm delighted to be here and can't wait to talk.
And Grace is an amazing partner for us here at Wizehire as well. And we're really excited and fortunate that she's able to join the call with us and share her perspectives and her experience. So I have some questions here for you, Grace. So I might be just kind of um, referring to my notes a bit, but I think, we've talked a little bit about AI, and I thought it'd be great for us to start this conversation, just kind of sharing a bit with the audience about what you're seeing from your point of view with what's happening with AI. And so, what do you think is pushing more teams to try AI with regard to hiring, especially right now? Like, what is the sort of like some of the catalyzing forces?
So there are a lot of different factors contributing to AI in recruiting right this second. If you could go to the next slide, Carmen.
Oh,
So a lot of it has to do with the economy. Employment is up to about 4.3% in the US. While there isn't a current global recession, we are in a period of the lowest growth ever without an out and out recession. Just everybody is doing more with less, is kind of the basics of just what's happening economically. And then you have AI legislation. Uh, Generally speaking, HR is pretty slow to adopt things because there's a lot of concerns around compliance and fairness and doing things the right way. However, in the past couple of years, there have been a lot of organizations laying the groundwork for AI to even be possible. So, the AI Act in Europe was a big one, which made recruiting an area where AI could be applied, but has a lot of restrictions. There's been a lot of legislation passed around in New York and California. And, just even a few months ago, or not a few months, but like 6 months ago, there were kind of a few companies that had, or a few countries that had AI legislation, and now it's just exploded. It's getting regulated everywhere. Um, and then lastly, I would say that one of the big contributing factors is the skills gap. The skills gap is something we always talk about in HR, definitely as long as I've been in this industry. It's the gap between the skills that you need to do a job and the skills that employees actually have. So your skills at your job are evolving faster than ever, and you have fewer and fewer people who have those skills. So that's really kind of making a perfect storm of this is the time for hiring to really start seeing a lot of AI. And if you go to the next slide, if you'd be so kind,
yes.
this is our talent intelligence category. So this is a category, if you have AI, you do talent management or recruiting, this is a category that looks at that software. And you can see just how huge it's been this year alone for this is all the new products. So this year so far, and the year's not over yet, we have added 99 new products in this category, which is just the highest ever by far.
Wow. Well, do you think that this trend will continue? I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball, I know. But do you think that this trend will continue and we'll see this kind of exceptional growth next year as well?
Um, I I think that we will see some growth next year, but I do think it's going to level off at
Mhm.
a certain point. I do think, again, this is in response to we have legislation down, we have laws down, so it's been possible, which is part of the reason this has exploded so quickly. I do think at a certain point it will level off. I don't see it happening quite yet. I do think that at least for the first part of next year, there's still going to be a lot of companies, racing to get new AI technology out there for hiring.
Yeah, yeah. It makes sense when you think about all of the things that you talked about that were driving this. And I'm very excited. We're going to talk about this a little later. I'm not going to like jump the gun, but I'm very excited about how we're approaching it. But even as someone who is in the space, it's hard not to recognize that there's a frenzy out there right now. When you think about the 99 products, right? Like there's a lot that's happened in this year. What are the features that you are seeing being adopted? What's really driving this growth?
So if you would go to the next slide, please. The number one feature that we are seeing in this category is candidate matching. That can mean a lot of different things. There are, some products that do some kind of basic, you're looking for X, Y, and Z skills. These are the candidates that have them. That can mean looking at resumes. That can mean looking at cover letters. But it can also mean some deeper insights and analytics, really going deep into, is this person a good culture fit? How did this person do in the interview? How did this person do on their resume? So that by far is the number one technology, number one feature I would say that we're seeing. What's kind of interesting is that I would say almost half of these have to do with the interview itself. So
Mm.
whether that's creating interview questions, whether that's having an automatic scorecard for interviews, because that's very, very difficult to do in an unbiased way, is to kind of compare one candidate to another and have your immediate reaction. I think anybody who's ever done an interview and had to do a round of like a few different candidates can say like, was that candidate better or worse than the last one? Did I just click with them more on a personal level? Is that fair? You know, um, so there's interview transcripts, things that automatically transcript the interview. Again, a lot of the technologies we're seeing are very specific to the interview, which I think is a testament to how much time that takes. However, some of the other technologies we're seeing have to do with more deeper insights. So report generation, and the hiring intelligence piece specifically, it's people want an AI to look objectively at
Mm.
their process and say what's good, what's bad, what needs to be tweaked. And then again, too, there's a lot of, we talk a lot about just candidate engagement. So sending emails to candidates, which just takes a enormous amount of time, but just auto sending to assure them that they're in this part of the process or another part of the process. We have the interview scheduled, stuff like that has been very big for just kind of, I would say, like quality of life upgrades is what I would call it.
Yeah, I think I was smiling because there was just like a few points you were making that just I think really resonated with also what we hear on our side too. First, I think candidate matching being kind of like the top feature adopted makes so much sense, especially when we reflect back on the top challenge of not finding enough qualified candidates. Because often when we hear that, it's both about quantity and quality. And so it's about how do you, if you have too much quantity, right? It's you can't cut through the noise to find the folks that are really high quality. So you want some kind of matching to make it work, or you're trying to think about maybe how you're identifying or sourcing people from in other ways, right? To bring them into your sort of funnel. And I thought the thing that you were saying also about interviewing was also very interesting. And that was one of the reasons why we kind of talked about this idea of hiring without the guesswork, because it can be really challenging for people to have a very structured process when they're interviewing, even when they're using AI and AI technologies, and to not just let themselves be yanked in different directions by either the technology or by kind of like the whims or chemistry of people on a specific call. And so, how do you leverage AI to have a more objective, unbiased process? So, I know we're early stages, but it is kind of exciting to see how things are going now. When we're talking about hiring, we're talking about basically a dual-sided marketplace, right? So we work very, very closely with employers, folks that are doing the hiring, but obviously there are job seekers on the other side, and they also have access to AI and AI tools. Um, so do you have a perspective or do you have any insights in terms of job seekers' adoption of AI and um, depending on that, how employers can sort of respond to that or should respond to that?
Yes, if you would go to the next slide. Job seekers are using AI a lot. The process of job hunting is has gotten so much more complicated. I think for those of us who have maybe been out of the job market for even just a few years, um, it's it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with, and AI is great at automating menial tasks. So, people are using it for just a range of things. Obviously, things like cover letters, resumes, customizing things, personalizing things. AI is great for doing that, en masse because you have to, every time. I remember the last time I was job hunting, I had one resume for digital marketing and another for another kind of job and another for another kind of job. And if I had had a tool that allowed me to do that super quick, that would have been just amazing because it's a pain. It's a pain to make, eight different resumes for different kinds of jobs. So, as you can kind of see from the slide, um, the other thing that, well, this is specifically about descent in the ranks, but
Oh, is this it?
yeah, sorry. um, but job seekers have been using AI for employment, about 40% of them. It's a really difficult number to get to. So I would say that we don't know. And I know that some technologies have kind of an AI will flag when people have used generative AI to write something, which I think is good um, when you're considering things and good to just be looking for, as with any AI, you want to cut out anything that looks fake or weird or just kind of sketchy. But something that's really interesting about job seekers is they're also using AI kind of almost as a reverse of the way recruiters are using it, where recruiters are building a whole pipeline to, optimize the work. And some job hunters are doing that too. They have, they have chat GPT integrations to help them en masse send things out and customize, personalize, send emails. So then you have emails going from, recruiters to job seekers who are both using AI to read and answer the emails, which is kind of funny. And then last, people also use AI for headshots, which is, I mean, it's like with Photoshop, but it's just an easier way when you don't have nice headshots to just make sure that you're getting a good product.
I'm gonna pose this question, and see if you have a perspective here. But someone was asking, like, how are candidates using it for job searches? Like, for sure they have it in terms of like they get how it helps with resume enhancements, but are you seeing other things that candidates are doing when it comes to job search?
Sourcing is the big thing.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a pain to go on 15 different job boards every single day and find the jobs that are in your range. So a lot of candidates are using it to just find jobs,
Yeah.
which is, I think, one of the biggest ways it's being used is just sourcing those jobs, looking for things they might be qualified for.
Yeah, I would imagine it is a great way to, because what we see in terms of behavior, depending on the role, is that you might find candidates who are applying to hundreds of jobs. I think a more sophisticated, and then again, this absolutely depends on the role, but like, a more sophisticated job seeker could figure out a way to consolidate and really hone in on like the core jobs that they want to spend a lot of time on. I'm sure that there are also some other interesting ways that people are leveraging it, like in terms of how they're integrating ChatGPT. But this is all speculation on my part. I think we're gonna like learn so much about this. One of the questions I had, and I suspect like the slide that we're gonna go to next is gonna speak to this a little bit, but what what do you think about the anxiety and uncertainty around AI? I mean, we did some research about 9 months ago, and there seemed to be a decent amount of um, anxiety around AI. Um, what are you kind of hearing or sensing? And set the slide that we just had up on the screen.
Yes, if you could go back a slide, apologies. I think this is something that people don't talk about enough when they're discussing AI, but AI feels like a real threat to people, um, which is a problem because the way that AI is most effective is when you teach it and you teach it what you want and you give it a bunch of data and you just more and more kind of refine the prompts, refine the data. And that can't happen if your workforce doesn't trust AI, or I think more specifically, doesn't trust that they will still have a job if they kind of automate some of the, daily things away. So as you can kind of see from the slide, um, there was a pretty shocking report from that talked about not just distrusting AI, but millennials and Gen Z out and out sabotaging the AI strategy. I don't think a lot of the surveys that I've seen, I don't think like offer this perspective. And I would love to see more data with people not just asking like, hey, do you use AI? How are you using it? But like, do you not use AI? Do you think it's bad? Are you scared of AI? Because I think a lot of those sentiments are getting lost because they're just not being asked about. Um, but then on the other side, there are people who want to use AI, think it could be really helpful in their job, and then aren't getting a lot of direction or support from their leadership team. So as we can kind of see from some of these numbers, like 62% of people from this one study want to use it at work, but only 38% of the companies have policies about it. 16% of employees see it as a threat, which that's still a pretty big number to see
Yeah.
it not just as a problem, but a threat.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people are also paying out of pocket for it. So that's something that I think just creates this, again, it creates this, situation where this is a new technology, we need to adopt it, but you're having trouble implementing it because people just aren't even starting out this conversation with that trust, which
Yeah.
is hard.
Which is an additional layer. If you're going to implement this, you definitely need to think about how you want to communicate this to your organization. No one wants sabotage. I think that is like a stunning piece of data, but actually not shocking in some ways either, right? When we think about it. Um, so I'm gonna bring up Katie in a bit, but before we did that, I wanted to just ask folks here another question. If you could have AI take over one hiring task immediately, what would it be? And you can just drop that in the chat if you don't mind. I'm just kind of curious to see what people are gonna say. And as we do that, going through the resumes, yes. As we do that, I'm going to bring up our next panelist. So Katie is going to join us. Katie is a strategic relationship manager here at Wizehire and is talking to customers just like all of you on the call all the time. Katie, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, and then I'd love to hear a little bit about the conversations that you're having with customers.
Yes, hi everyone. Like Carmen said, my name is Katy Klefeker. I am the strategic relationship manager here at Wizehire, and I have the honor of working with alongside businesses as they use Wizehire to build their teams. I saw Jill in the chat is from Dallas, and I'm also from Dallas, and it's always nice to see others in the area. So yeah, that's me.
Oh, I sorry, I'm getting my questions together.
No, please.
So we can, I think this will be good too, because I think what we've seen so far is kind of like what's happening at the macro level, but like now, like what's kind of happening a little bit more in the day to day. So what, I think even before we get into AI, I think AI is kind of hopefully a way to solve problems. I would
Mhm.
like to just hear a little bit more about what you are just hearing from customers in general. Like, where is the black box for them? Where are they guessing and hiring? What are the challenges that you're hearing about most?
hmm I actually some of the stuff that's in the chat is really speaks to this a lot. Going through resumes and paring things down as far as really selecting the candidates that you want to move forward with. I think I have, like I said, I work with a range of customers. So we've got hospitality, we've got legal, we've got finance, you've got and in between all of those, there's so much nuance as far as what a candidate actually needs in order to be successful in that role. And I think sometimes, the noise of how do we set our qualifications and set the things that we know that people need to have, but also be realistic about seeing the candidate as the whole picture and how they might still be able to fit in the role in the absence of some of these qualifications. And so I think that that's really where a lot of the guesswork still comes in.
Yeah.
And there's only so much that you can really tell about a person from their resume and from the information that you have immediately available. And I do see a future where some of the AI tools where it helps consolidate some of that information more and maybe even get more information from a candidate on the front end to help pare down some of that noise. Is how I kind of see that potentially going in the future as well. But that tends to be one of the bigger things. It's like, okay, I have all these people. How do I really decide who and how I want to move forward?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting. I mean, it sounds like it's both. My understanding of the customers that you work with too, Katie, is that
Mhm.
it is, some folks might be specifically focused in HR or recruiting, but many
Yes.
folks might be focused on operations or just have a broader remit. So the time that they have to spend doing some of this may vary greatly.
Yes.
So it sounds like they want to get more information, but how do you, like, where do you see the opportunities to save time for them?
I think that and that's such a great point that it really, you've got somebody who this is their job, they're in recruiting, they're on the HR side, and that is what they are, that is their focus. But then I also work with plenty of people who they're a general manager at a hotel, so they're running a hotel while also trying to staff it. And like, hey, sorry, I got a housekeeping emergency. I was, making a bed, and then now I'm here like trying to hire for that housekeeper and things like that. And so I think that the biggest time saver, honestly, is being just quicker to act and not overthinking too much. I think
Mhm,
that people
mhm.
get it can be very easy to get caught up in making sure that every single box is checked. And don't get me wrong, for certain positions, like you obviously, if you're hiring for a dentist, they need to be a dentist. They don't just need to have, watched a TV show about dentists. And so there's obviously so much range there. But I think that picking up the phone, calling, getting in front of somebody as quickly as possible, because, all the information that Grace gave earlier as well is so helpful to think of from the job seeker side. How many other jobs are they applying for? Who else is getting back to them faster? And who else is, kind of pursuing them on the other side? And so I think some of that is only going to be answered and the time saving that is only going to be answered by just moving forward. Contact
Yeah.
candidates, they might not check every single box, but they're going to, at least get some of the main ones, and then you can learn a little bit more about them later. And so I think acting faster is probably one of the best ways to save time.
Yeah. And I suspect the next question I ask is going to be kind of like related to what you just said. But if you could prescribe one
Mhm.
sort of low lift thing, yeah, we'll say low lift thing that folks could do to, um, without that doesn't add a lot of complexity to
Mhm.
actually be able to cut time,
Mhm.
what would you recommend?
So I think going way back to the beginning and looking at your job ad itself is probably one of the biggest, most overlooked areas of the hiring process, which I think is really interesting. And the AI tools, are going to help save us some time as far as you're going to use ChatGPT to get that job description out, and it's going to hit all the marks, but the candidate reading it is like, okay. And I don't know who you are as a company. I don't know what this business is like. I don't know how you're going to take care of me as an employee. Do I have PTO? Do I have health insurance? Like, asking the questions that you have to ask whenever you're looking at, taking your next job opportunity. And especially whenever you're looking at, you have an idea in your head of the exact person that is going to be right for this job. Think of it as writing that job ad to speak to that person to get them excited about hitting apply and moving forward with the next process. Right out of the gate, you're going to have a more engaged candidate because they were more hooked by just like, oh, well, I need a job and this company is hiring, and more, oh wow, I can see myself building a career here because they speak like I do, they hit all the same points and care about the same things that I do. And already you've kind of created a bit of a connection with them before you even have any communication. And again, I think it's a pretty overlooked process because we need to get the job posted, we need to get it out, we need to get it on the boards and get candidates in. But even just taking a few more minutes to infuse your company culture, again, how you're going to take care of them, how you're going to differentiate yourself from the competitor that's hiring for the same position, and all of that can end up saving you so much time later, but also end up getting you people in your pipeline who are already aligned with, your voice and your mission.
I love that. I love the fundamentals of that too. I mean, recruiting now is, I'm in marketing and I always say it's marketing, it's not sales. You don't get to like talk to people. Really, you're trying to pull people to you,
Yes. Yes.
attract. And so, one of the things that we used to say is think about the person who's the most successful person in that role that you've ever hired or you have there. And what is it about that person that is really something that you can incorporate into a job
Yes.
description?
Yeah. How can you clone them? And how can you try to get more
I
people
don't
like
know. I
them?
think I saw someone on the call who's in insurance, and when folks would be hiring folks who were, working call centers in insurance, the most successful folks were folks who were actually very empathetic. They actually wanted to help people.
Yes.
And then that becomes something that you can think about when you're formulating these job descriptions.
Yes. And that point about looking at your top performers that you already have, and even taking a moment to interview them and say, what made you apply for this job whenever you initially came in, and what motivates you to be successful here, and how are we, having kind of a little conversation with them. If you're really trying to find more people like them, really finding out what makes them tick and how they see themselves as being successful in your company, and how you could speak to another person exactly like them, could also end up being like I said, whenever you think about it as a part of the big picture, you take two different routes. That route is ultimately going to save you so much time and hopefully get you the very best candidate where you're not having to fill that role again in 6 months.
Yeah. So I think the question that I have for you now is, you've kind of talked about the customers that you're talking to, kind of the problems and the challenges that they're dealing with. Um, how, if at all, do you think they're leveraging AI? And
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, right now I think everybody's, a lot of the stuff that Grace spoke to is very much what I'm, if I use this too much, especially when you look at from a recruiting perspective, you're like, if I use this too much and AI becomes too competent, and then where do I fit in
Yeah.
that? As well as all the things, I mentioned earlier, working with a range of different industries, and you get into some of these industries with, the different, not only are there, more strict compliance laws in general, but they differ by state. And there's so much nuance that I think people are just like, I also think sometimes people are like, what is AI? Like when we talk about AI, what is it? And like, how do
Yeah.
I use it? I think that is even a conversation that I've had, outside of just using Chat GPT, like what actually is it and how does it fit into my day-to-day life? I think that, again, pointing back to the statistics that Grace shared, the biggest one that they are either using or hoping to use is resume or candidate matching, to say like, I want to answer all the questions that we were talking about earlier. We've got a lot of noise. We have these candidates. How do we make sure that we're focusing on the right ones as quickly as possible, and not missing someone to, again, the competitor next door, because they probably applied to their job too. And so I would say that's probably the biggest comfort level that I have seen in my
Yeah.
customer base. And then anything outside of that, there's a lot of conversations, about like, how can we automate certain processes, and how can we make sure we're reaching everybody, and how can we make sure that we're not losing people and getting lost in the shuffle. But again, I think that's the questions of, can we even do that, as with the legality of it? What is that? Like, what is AI again? And how do we make sure that we're actually setting ourselves up for wins in those areas and not just creating more problems? And so, but I think, getting the best candidates in front of them as quickly as possible, getting messaging out to them as quickly as possible for, keeping them in the funnel, and as well as anybody that has in their existing pipeline who has applied to jobs previously, tapping back into that, to save a little bit of time if they're having to backfill a role. So I would see those as kind of the most comfort level tools that I'm seeing. And then otherwise, I think it's just a lot of question marks.
Yeah, yeah, which I totally
Yes.
can appreciate.
Yes.
I know Katy introduced herself, but Katy is part of our customer success team. We have strategic relationship managers. We also have Wizehire coaches, because even though we are very much focused on AI and how we can leverage it to, create better outcomes for you all, we absolutely believe in being a human first organization. and really kind of understand, especially in a function like, hiring, how important it is. Um, so I'm gonna bring up my last guest in a little bit, but before that, I have a question for all the folks on the call who are not using AI. And I've talked to some of you, so I know you're not using it. I'm curious, what is preventing you from using AI? Is it, it could simply be that you don't have enough time. You're still kind of in the research and exploratory phase. You are highly skeptical. Your boss said no, whatever the thing is. But I'm very curious to hear from folks why they haven't. And I'm talking more specifically about in the hiring process or kind of like at work as opposed to personally. Um, so I'll let that sit, that folks think about it, but I would love it if you could drop, your thoughts in the chat. And as people are dropping things, if folks want to respond, that would be great. Because I think that would be interesting insights as well. So now I'm going to bring up our last guest, who is our esteemed CEO, Sid. I have a couple of questions for you, Sid, but and you're also going to give folks on the call a sneak peek of something that's
Yep.
coming that is, I think, coming, not even necessarily here yet.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I just had a couple of questions because it's kind of interesting because we're hearing about all the things that AI can do, the problems that customers have. There's still not adoption quite yet when we think about kind of all of those things and how they're working together. So I'm curious to hear from you, just sort of like how you think about that, how you think about how Wizehire is thinking about the role that AI can play in helping to address those problems and like hopefully increase adoption.
Yeah, so one of the most interesting things I think we're seeing right now with AI adoption is that when you put someone in a room or a call with someone that's a little bit ahead in adoption or has like something that's working and they share, that's how like the best practices are happening. It's one of these things where, we only know how to use ChatGPT to the level that we figured it out. And then the moment someone shows us a new workflow, we have all this new inspiration. And I think one of our responsibilities to customers is to always be out there finding best practices, bringing in settings like this, in like these small group settings. So that I think is one of these things that holds the whole ecosystem back, which is just like there's so many ways we're using it. It's hard for us to know best practice. The best thing to do is ask the question every time you run into someone, like, "Hey, how are you using it?" And I guarantee you'll get like 5 new nuggets that you weren't aware of.
Yeah, how do you, we are very much kind of, Wise Heart Coaches has always been a part of kind of who we are. How do you think about kind of like AI and then humans and how they kind of work together or don't work together?
So as Grace, Katie were both sharing, right? There's obvious anxiety around there. And I think what you'll see from Wizehire, and I think a lot of our other peers out there, is an emphasis on leveraging the tools where they're great as tools to really enable the superpowers that we have as people, which is, to focus on connection and building, bonds. As Katie was kind of talking about like the hiring process, it's that interview, how you connect with someone, how you onboard them. That's going to like define how they do in your organization. And our worldview, and you always find me as the person that's much more abundance oriented. We are emphatically running fast to leverage this technology on your behalf to take on that busy work. I can't wait to chat more about the stuff that everyone's put in the chat, but we are seeing the opportunity for AI to do work in matching, do work in the busy work behind the scenes, scheduling, solving one of my favorite problems, which is missed connections as an example. So definitely, I think it's one of these incredible things where if we can have it do the busy work that frees us up to do what we're great at, spend more time with our customers, spend more time with our teams, I think that's how like, we, especially in like small growing businesses, can win.
There's like so much great kind of like comments and things in the chat. I do want to say we are probably going to go a little past 1:45. I just want to acknowledge that if folks can stay on like 5 or 10 minutes longer, great. If you can't, but I just always feel like it's very important for me to
There'll always
acknowledge
be a recording that we'll send out as well.
and
Yeah.
respect folks' time. So it is being recorded. But one thing that I actually wanted to share with folks is we saw this really interesting data coming out. And let me just share, because I think the other thought when I think about sort of like AI and humans, right, is like I've always sort of had this perspective of kind of like AI extending the bias. But there's this really interesting research that shows that AI systems are actually fairer. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to remove the human in the loop component of this, right? They are not immune to bias. They are often the result of the data that is input into them. But when we look at this, it actually says that AI systems will treat demographic groups a little bit more fairly. So this is just looking overall. But even when we look at it in terms of gender, we see that female candidates experience up to 39% fairer treatment with AI, and then also with racial minorities. So I just thought this was an interesting insight because I was actually surprised by this. But I think it is interesting when we think about the fact that it could potentially add more objectivity into the process as well.
I I think a big part of the objectivity comes from, and I think there's a fair question that I think as I was like skimming the chat, like I think like Mike mentioned, and I think a few others, which is we initially have some skepticism when we're using the tools ourselves because we're working with it in like, typically everyone's using it in ChatGPT. We got that one box, we're putting a couple like 140 characters in, right? And I think where you get the gap of skepticism and error is when we have less context and less guardrails. I think a lot of the vendors, Wizehire included, what we're spending a lot of time on is to provide ample, content for it, ample context, ample evaluation. And I think by being super rigorous about it, because we are in a regulated space on everyone's behalf, we have to ensure that we're going to be compliant with where the rules and the regulations are going to go. I think that's that hard work that's been happening behind the scenes that often isn't talked about is why we're getting to these great outcomes when it comes from like a bias perspective. I was at a conference last week and like the Department of Labor Secretary was there and they were talking a lot about how they're trying to aggressively, open up these regulations to make it easier for technology, much like as Grace shared, catch up and accelerate. So I think we're seeing it all play out, but I think it all comes down to Carmen. These systems have to be thoughtfully built. They have
Yeah.
to, you have to like take a couple steps back. You have to have a lot of refinement around it. That's the only way we can earn the trust for it to do like, even partially, sensitive things.
Yeah. I'm really excited about the things that we're doing here at Wizehire. I don't know if you want to go ahead and give folks kind of like a sneak peek of some of the stuff that we're working on.
Yeah, I think in the few minutes that we have left, and again, we'll have a recording of it. I'll actually dive into a dashboard, cover a couple of the topics that were also in the chat, and then I think we can do some Q&A with those that are around. So as a recap and level set for everyone, this is the Wizehire dashboard that I think everyone's known and loved. And earlier this year, we launched our agent Scout, who is behind the scenes doing busy work on your behalf. And as Katie was mentioning, right now in this competitive labor market, what's the one thing that you can do is to have speed, follow up with the right people at the right time, and you can obviate the challenge of not having enough candidates. And so one thing, just to highlight a feature that's existed for a while, is Scout right on your dashboard, helping you focus on who you should spend your time with if you only have a few minutes. Again, a lot more improvement about to launch here. And the way that we've done matching at Wizehire has gone through some significant investment and change, driven by, I think, so many of the conversations from folks that are on the call. This is another tab where, we're posting a job. It's on our demo environment, something that everyone has seen, I think, before. One thing that we're now doing, in this case, I'm posting a job that is a remote inside sales agent, is actually soon we'll be giving you, the employer, more control on our matching. So previously, our matching has always been based on the screening questions that you pick. We're big believers of a scorecard-based hiring process where we're reducing bias along the way. And one thing we want to do is empower you to have more control on how we'll define those matches. What should be a must-have? What are the categories of levels of experience that you believe are critical for your role? And along the way, you'll soon see also data backed on how these requirements will affect your overall hiring pool. Now, one thing that's super exciting about these updates is that that's going to drive a greater quality of our talent match product, which was also launched, I think, mid last year. Here again, we're using the criteria that you tell us are critical to make an apples to apples comparison across all of your talent. So again, in the frenzied, fast-paced businesses that we're all in, we can spend the right time with the right people. Now, two things that are also going on behind the scenes, and as you think about the dialogue that's in the chat, it's we need these systems to explain to us how they get to the answer. And I think that's such a fair requirement. And we're not seeing a lot of people investing in this. And that's why I'm super excited to share one of the big things that's on the horizon with Scout's Talent Match is that it'll show the work. And here's an example of where in real time, it's going to actually read the resume and explain the answers. When we think about that top pain point that everyone shared, which was not enough qualified candidates, what our data shares is that often it's that the candidates are not putting their best foot forward. They're not filling out the screening question. As a result, they're being filtered out, perhaps prematurely. And so with what's upcoming at Wizehire, Scout is going to do the busy work of scanning that resume and literally explaining how it comes to an answer. In this case, does someone have a real estate license? Scout is going line by line in the resume. And to the question of like, can these systems work well here? What our research has found is that when we really focus them on very specific tasks where we have a very high bar, these systems have to be 95, 97% accurate before we'll even put them out for our general audience. They can do quite a good job, but it just requires a lot of finesse. The final part that we get super excited about, this is going to be launching in the weeks ahead, is we're big believers of this concept of building a wide talent universe. Every time that we talk to customers, we know that you have a challenge in your business, someone called out, you're growing, and every candidate that's ever applied for your roles, we believe that's someone that you can nurture and build a relationship with. So the same technology behind the match that I just highlighted, in the days ahead, we'll actually see it leveraged to analyze every applicant that has ever applied for your organization. And even if they haven't answered the screening questions, in this example, Manuel, we will have Scout do that hard work of reading the resume to infer an answer and therefore give you that apples to apples fit of, hey, Manuel did not answer a question if they have real estate inside sales experience, but our AI estimate is that they have 3 to 5 years experience and therefore are a great fit. The final part in our responsibility to y'all to get the right talent ASAP in the market, Scout's going to do the busy work of actually inviting that applicant to apply on your behalf. Many of y'all have seen that Scout is already in the platform doing many little things like this behind the scenes. Whether in this case, I'm on a demo account with Danny Ocean, you can click schedule interview and it'll do that work to schedule the interview and do the follow-ups to ensure people show up for that interview. So in the brief seconds that I think we had, hopefully that covers some of the highlights. We have a lot more that's coming up. I do want to answer some of the questions about features that have existed that we're going to be coming back with, but I want to pause and give Carmen back some time before we answer more questions.
Yeah, no, I was gonna jump right in because I saw that Jessica had asked about, having a better filter to remove out of country, out of state applicants. And I believe that that's something that will be part of the scorecard.
Yes. I'm going to try to navigate actually again on this demo environment. So we are able to infer if someone is in country or not, even if they did not apply and fill out the questionnaire. There'll be a filter that'll actually show up for location. And for remote jobs, we'll actually be able to say if they're within the country or not. That one, we're working on improving our accuracy and getting it to that 95+% mark that we talked about. But definitely, there's some work that we're doing there to help, especially with the flood of out-of-country applicants that people have seen. I think there was another question that came up about the AI-driven writing of job ads and revising of job ads.
Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about this one. So Wizehire has always had an AI system that writes the first draft, but I think the challenge becomes when people make edits and then it's time to refresh the job post. We did for between 2023 and 24 have our first version of a AI refresh. That did get sunset a little bit ago for an upcoming version that we believe is far more robust based on everyone's feedback. Because one theme that came up in the thread was when we dig into it, sometimes it makes mistakes. Our initial version was making a few mistakes, and that's why we took a few steps back, went back to the lab, and the version that we have coming out is going to involve something that I think is pretty important, which is these systems work well when there is a human in the loop to audit them and to ensure that they're doing a great job. Our first version of AI Refresh did not have as much auditing by our team, and this upcoming version has far more introspection, far more controls. And I think that's generally the way that a lot of these systems are going to go, where it's, we'll let the AI do the busy work, and our role and responsibility, whether it's in hiring or other parts of our job, becomes the audit, the verification, because we should always trust but verify for sure with these things.
So Mike, we kind of observed what you were experiencing and have adjusted accordingly. So now you don't have to do that, right? We can do that on your behalf. I think there was a question in Q&A as well. Is the AI sophisticated enough yet for me to do a phone interview?
Okay. So now we're talking a little bit in early 2026, and again, for the recording, I think it's perfectly fine to talk about this. We've been experimenting with actually AI phone interviews. We think that the place that these work really well is for the initial screens and only for high volume roles when the interview products are being very clear with the candidate that that's what they've been invited to, right? You're earning the right to work with someone as are they work in the right to work with you. And I think as long as we're very clear about these things, we have actually been working on a version of this for high volume roles like inside sales, where the few customers that are in the beta, if you want to be part of the beta, reach out to us. Happy to include you in it. Have been finding it to be very successful, because what you end up getting out of it is we'll run a script of that interview, which again comes from the interview guides that are in the platform. You'll get the raw transcripts, and I think what becomes really interesting is that you can ground the match in what was said in the interview. Back to right now, if matches are based on screener questions, that's fine. But can we dig deeper? Now we're about to do that with resumes. Next, can we do that with actually what happened in the interview? Again, with everyone's consent and of course ability to like opt in for it. We definitely don't think it's the wisest thing for like the fourth round interview. Great
Yeah.
for the first round interview.
Yeah, and I think, Julie also had sort of on there about making sure that it's not like an AI sort of job seeker. I think that's going to be something that we all have to think about. And hopefully, with it being that initial screen, right? Like the technology can do kind of like the heavy lifting to determine that.
Yeah, we find people are much more open to the phone screen than the video screen with the avatar, and that's why I think like we're leaning more in that direction, especially for the type of roles that we help with.
Yeah. I recognize that we can, let me try to get another question in here. But can the applicant fake it like a deep fake? It gets data about my company. It's interesting. Like, I just have to say, I'm always surprised at how much time people will spend in doing the wrong thing when they could just spend that time doing the right thing. But Julie, that is a very good question. If they can, it's very interesting. But Sid, any thoughts on like if technology can help address
Yeah,
that?
I'll maybe speak broadly to a couple of questions that came up on the topic of job seekers using AI and where we think things are going. Yes, there's always like these, nefarious edge cases, and it is disheartening. But we're planning for a world, and I think we'll see some announcements in October, November, where so much of job seeking is going to new places. So not on the top job sites anymore, not on the ways that we used to recruit 5 to 6 years ago. And so our responsibility at Wizehire is to follow those shifts. And so at Wizehire, we'll be actually announcing upcoming partnerships with some of the top platforms out there where job seekers are spending more of their time so that your jobs are getting in front of them there. I think there was a question earlier about how do job seekers find jobs? Right now, they're literally on ChatGPT finding jobs. They're going on bespoke sites for finding these jobs. And what we see for that type of candidate is that we can actually deliver a different experience. Those candidates are often applying in mass, in volume, and of course that's like their prerogative. But is it as sincere an application as someone that's spending time writing an artisanal cover letter, doing research about your organization? What we think at Wizehire is that these should be different swim lanes for applications. And we actually think that Scout, our agent, can spend more time vetting those candidates if they're applying with an AI. In fact, our AI should probably have a dialogue with that AI and do a pre-screen. And so that by the time you get an AI application, it's someone that's like sincerely interested and qualified. And I think if we can meet that bar, that's kind of the future that we're running toward. So it's going to be a wild time. As we said, it's a fast moving world in AI. I think both at Wizehire, but everywhere.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's been very interesting. There's a lot more to come. I'm gonna get you guys out of here, right, in 4 minutes. Even though there's so much to say, I have a couple more things that I just wanted to share as we talk about talent match, right? So, um, already on our platform, right, you can leverage talent match to be matched with folks who have applied to your jobs. We are shortly, and I mean very shortly, going to be launching matches that are coming from your candidate, your talent pool, folks who have applied to other jobs in your organization, but perhaps haven't applied to that specific job. And then we have something really exciting. Hopefully, we can talk about it, Sid. Something really exciting that's coming like a little bit further down the pike where we'll be able to match you with people or create even a broader talent universe for you for people who haven't even applied to jobs at your organization, but because we can use AI and Wizehire Scout, we can identify folks that are a great fit and you can invite to apply. So we are gonna help you sort of hopefully get over this hump that we're all experiencing as we try to think about the best way to use it to actually solve problems. Um, and wanted to just kind of like wrap up really quickly. We talked about questions. I sort of just wanted to have like 5 things to kind of remember. And there's a lot of good insights, right? But this was just sort of like reflecting on like the whole conversations. The hiring landscape is shifting fast, and you know this. We've talked about this and all of the things that we've discussed. AI is already here. It's here. It's on both sides of the table. It's maybe nascent stages, but both job seekers and employers. We think it can actually help you and raise the standards and actually make it easier for you to get this work done. And getting broader access to talent is going to be critical. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are here to help you make this as simple as possible. And we're going to, Sid in particular is going to do a lot of sort of like the deep work required to make this as straightforward and streamlined as possible so that we can incorporate it to our hiring processes. Um, I did just want to wrap up by thanking everyone for their time and attention. Our team is here for you. Grace, thank you so much.
Definitely.
We could have probably just done an hour with you alone, sharing all of your insights. And if that's something you're interested in, folks, let us know. Katie also sharing your insights on customers and kind of what they're experiencing in their day to day. And of course, you as well, Sid, who always comes with such enthusiasm and excitement and able to share what's happening. Sid, anything to share or before we close it up?
No, I think definitely reach out if you guys are interested in learning more. We're always eager to work and partner with folks, especially with some of these upcoming betas. Our responsibility to y'all is to help you navigate these changing times. I love Julie's comment. These are our thoughts. They're in partnership with y'all. We're not AI avatars. And thanks again for allowing us to support y'all in your growth. Thank you.